Hello, my name is Tom Ramage. I'm an economic policy analyst at the Korea Economic Institute of America. And today we have Dr. Sungjin Park and Kristi Shalla in to talk to us about their new book, Seoul, Tale of a Smart City. Kristi Shalla is an expert in global economic development and building innovative ecosystems, and currently holds the position of Innovation Commissioner at the Embassy of Switzerland in Washington, D.C. She's an urban mobility enthusiast with 15 years of development experience in the United States, Asia, and Europe. And before relocating to Washington, D.C. in the fall of 2020, Kristi was head of project development at the Center for Innovation in Transport in Barcelona, Spain, where she built public and private partnerships in transport and smart city research for projects around the globe. Kristi is an experienced speaker, lecturer, and contributor on the topic of urban mobility, smart city development, and international expansion. She's the co-author of the book Seoul, Tale of a Smart City, which was recently published. Dr. Sungjin Park is an industry expert for smart cities at LGU Plus with 2 decades of experience in the field. Her journey began as a city planner at the Incheon Institute. Following the completion of her PhD in urban planning and policy in the United States, she embarked on an 8-year tenure with Samsung SDS as a smart city consultant, specializing in the execution of various smart city consulting projects. In 2021, Dr. Park transitioned to the LG Smart City team and has been dedicated to driving service innovations, leading project implementations, and spearheading business developments for Sejong and Busan national pilot cities, a prominent K-Smart City initiative in South Korea. Additionally, Dr. Park is highly engaged as a speaker within the realm of smart cities, sharing her experience and insights at various conferences and events. So anybody who's an observer of politics or urban planning in itself in Korea knows about the miraculous transformation that Seoul has undergone since the end of the Korean War to become a world-class city. So Seoul has become known for internationally acclaimed urban renewal projects, among other things, the Cheonggyecheon River Restoration, the Dongdaemun Design Plaza, the Han River Renewal. All of these have helped make Seoul a world design capital. So I guess my first question for both of you is, what got you interested in smart cities? How about Dr. Park? Let's start with you.
Okay, so actually interested in smart cities actually began around 2010, actually when I was selecting a topic for my doctoral dissertation. At that time, actually there are the trends in international development field called ICT for development, meaning that to the developing country, provide computers and computer programming education and the deployment of public Wi-Fi and so on. So those kind of project going on actually kind of made me kind of interested in how this type of ICT technologies can improve or help to promote the better cities. So actually that's where I started to get interested in smart cities, and that actually led me to IT companies instead of a research institution or public policy institution. And it's been over, I think, 10 years now since I work in the field of private sector IT companies.
Wow, that's really interesting. And for Kristi, we understand that you have a background in this as well?
Yeah, but I came about it in a much more kind of organic way. I grew up in the middle of the U.S. where, it's not a very smart city. It's a smaller city. So everyone, there was no public transport. There was really not much thought given to urban development and urban planning. I think it was really based on what made sense economically. So I think when I started traveling, especially when I studied in Germany, and then I lived in Europe for a long time, I started to experience cities with better urban development. public transportation that facilitates your life, that just makes it easier to get around and more worry-free. Then when I moved back to the United States, I was working in economic development, and I started working with Singapore. And at the time, Singapore wasn't really a smart city, but it wasn't a not smart city either, just because it's a small, dense city. And I think that trend was really starting. And then I started working with the Hong Kong government. And of course, Hong Kong is kind of naturally a smart city just because it's so high density that it has a lot of urban solutions and citizen-centered solutions. But it was really in 2018 when I started working for the Center for Innovation in Transport that I started working more specifically with smart cities, because we were talking about smart transport or public transportation as part of a smart city plan. I also worked very heavily with South Korea. I worked with the Korean Railroad Research Institute on a project re-implementing the tram in the city of Daejeon. Also, the Smart City Challenge with the city of Suwon. So then I guess I was really hooked because I really loved the idea of there being services to make like cities easier to use and more citizen friendly and kind of aiding the way that we live through technology.
So when we think of the word smart city, we think of these very compact, dense cities like Singapore and Hong Kong and the use of technology.
Mm-hmm.
But one of the things that your book touches on is that there's no set definition of what a smart city is. And in the United States, we sometimes use the term sustainable city. So I guess for Kristi, what would you define as a smart city in your own words?
Well, I mean, the very strict definition of a smart city is urban development through technology, through technological practices. But when we looked at a smart city development of Seoul, we looked at it at a more holistic level, because I think a smart city policy brings a lot of other things into the equation. I mean, if you're looking at a smart city solution, then usually it's always going to be technology based. There's usually a lot of AI in it, a lot of sensor technology and IoT. But if you're looking at a smart city plan, then that can also, and that should also include other types of less technologically, or at least on the front end, less technologically oriented interventions.
So, Dr. Park, when did Seoul embark on becoming a smart city?
Actually, that sounds very easy question, but somehow actually it turns out to be very difficult one, because there is no clear year that say Seoul kind of begin to be transformed into smart cities. But I can say 2 years. The first one is 2003. That is when the Seoul public transport reform started to embark. So as many people know, the concept of Seoul public transport reform not only deploying bus rapid transit system all over Seoul, but also kind of integrate like ICT information and communication technology, like a smart card system, into public transport system. So that could be considered as the year that when Seoul started to like a smart city project. And another year I can say is 2008. 2008 is the year that the South Korean government established or announced the Smart City Act. So the Smart City Act is about guide how the municipalities or cities to implement the smart services and so on. So based on that law, Seoul administration, they established a unit responsible for the implementation of smart services, and also they started to allocate some budgets only for smart service implementation.
So I want to ask about the digital mayor's office in a second, because that sounds like one of the most exciting parts of Seoul as a smart city. But before I get to that, Kristi, I was just wondering if you could talk about some of the most successful smart city developments in Seoul, about what they've been doing.
Okay. I mean, I think like most successful is very subjective, of course, but I think probably the Cheonghaecheon restoration project and the public transport restructuring of 2003. I mean, those are arguably the most successful at this point, just because they're really the first. They kind of set that agenda of developing more smart city policy, and they really put Seoul and South Korea on the map as leaders in the smart city space.
Can we talk about what the Cheonghaecheon restoration project is? So this was the river redevelopment in the middle of Seoul.
So it's such an interesting project because it also is really associated with the economic development of South Korea in general, because Cheonghaecheon stream is kind of like a stream that always ran through Seoul and through Gangbok, the northern part of Seoul, or the older part of Seoul. And it had flooded, but it was also, after the war, it was where a lot of tenements were set up. It was kind of just a dirty stream that ran through the city. And so as part of the development project in the 70s, they decided they were going to cover it and put a highway there. And that would enable transport throughout the city, right? But the city continued to grow and grow and grow. And so towards the end of the 90s, they were saying, you know, this is maybe a little bit dangerous. We need to do something to restore this highway. And there was kind of a smaller movement that started to make themselves heard to really remove the highway, which is kind of I mean, when you think about Seoul, Greater Seoul is 25 million people, and this was a major highway in the city. So Lee Myung-bak had been in Washington, D.C., and he had studied like the Big Dig project in Boston. So he had this idea for bringing nature back to downtown. And it was a relatively difficult project to get through. And, you know, his nickname is a bulldozer. So they actually removed it, and then they restored this stream to this older part of Seoul, which was actually that area was a little bit more depressed. Gangnam was definitely the better part of Seoul at the time, but it's really revitalized the area, and it's brought temperatures down a significant amount. It's brought wildlife back to the city. There's a lot of programming. I mean, I really love this area. It's a wonderful place to go. And I mean, I think the first time Songjin and I we met, we went there, and it was January at lunchtime, and people were out taking walks. So it really gave people green space in the city. It gave them a little bit of nature in the concrete jungle that is Seoul.
And a lot of some of the other projects, I mean, there's the Dongdaemun Design Plaza, which took the place of a former stadium site. There's the Han River Renewal Restoration Project. Can you talk about some of the initiatives that maybe use technology in Seoul?
Well, I think the big one is really the transport reform. That's another amazing project, and it's really famous around the world, and it really set up Seoul to continue to build on their transport offering and smart transport development. So basically, and this was really what kind of launched the idea of writing this book, is that through all this uncontrolled growth and high levels of growth through the 70s, 80s, and 90s, public transport in Seoul became a bit chaotic. So there was car usage started to increase. Buses were private, so they were competing with these newly constructed metro lines. It was just causing commutes to become longer. It wasn't that efficient for people to take the bus, so they were switching to other modes of transportation. And so that was one of Lee Myung-bak's campaign promises, that he would restructure transport. But he did it in a way that was really wonderful. That really worked well for the city. So the bus operators are still privatized, are still private, but but there's oversight from the government. And so actually part of the kind of idea of the book came about because I was talking to someone in Latin America who kind of described exactly that same situation, but they haven't had this bus reform. So I thought, the story of Seoul would be really interesting to tell to economies that, especially these big cities like Mexico City or Bogota, that are really looking at what can they do to enable, because transport is how people access opportunities, so enable their citizens to access opportunities. So what they did is they kind of restructured the bus network so that it was all under the purview of a city office. And then subsidies were given to the bus operators, which also meant that they needed to complete all of their routes. And that was an issue before the bus reforms as well, because bus drivers were usually paid through fare collection. So if there were stops that were maybe less popular, there were less people, sometimes they would just not go there, which also causes a big problem in terms of transport equity and getting people to where they need to go. So basically, giving overview from a city office that really enabled the city to build this reliable bus transport network. They also added different types of buses. So they structured it in a way that there were 5 or 6 different types of buses. One of them came from outside the city, BRT lines that were kind of like express buses that came from outside the city. They were also coordinated with the subway line, so they augmented the subway network instead of competing with it. And then also what they did is they used one payment platform. So they created a system that allowed all of the transport operators to be paid through the same smart card. And now it's a smart app, obviously.
T-Money.
Yeah, T-Money. And so at the time, this enabled the government to really, it really enabled the government to cut or give people discounts so that it would incentivize the use of public transportation and then clear the roads a little bit and alleviate some of the traffic problems. But the secondary effect of that is that they have this perfect travel data. So in terms of how they improve the public transport system, they're able to see exactly how people travel around the city. They're able to see when there are crowds at certain stations, what interventions they're able to implement in order to try and redirect some traffic, to alleviate traffic in certain stations. So it really enabled a better management of the transport system. And so that's one of the reasons why it's been such a studied program or reform program, is because it took this mega city and then it made the transport manageable and organized.
And a lot of this data, particularly on traffic congestion, seems like it's been built into what has been called the Digital Mayor's Office in Seoul. So foremost, Seoul appointed a chief information officer, but there's now this app. It's a digital dashboard where you can see the live performance of many of these metrics in Seoul, including inflation. So Dr. Park, can you tell us about what this Digital Mayor's Office is and how it helps not only the mayor, but also citizens of Seoul to look at it?
Yeah, actually, for Digital Mayor's Office, it is a very huge, unified platform or system that integrate all kind of systems spread over different units in Seoul, the city of Seoul. So basically, all the CCTVs and all the open data, for example, even you can see the price of goods, or you can see the financial status of the city and the implementation progress, and also the number of accidents or the number of births or deaths. Those kind of indicators you could see through this Digital Mayor's Office. And I think the significance of this digital mayor's office, I know that most of cities now, they are handling like data, but actually like more than you imagine, actually integrating data and system is quite difficult job because most of actually officials, they reluctant to open their data or systems, and also there exists some disparities in data quality and system qualities. So it's easy to say, but the integrating all this type of over like 300 systems and show the like a result of the analysis of data through like indicators. This is really hard work, and I think like Park Won-sun, because I think his leadership, this type of platform could happen. That is what I think. And another question you had about how digital mayor's office interact with citizens. Actually, I did not see that kind of significant kind of news about it, but I checked, and there are some kind of bot system that citizen through mobile digital mayor's office, they can actually evaluate like a kind of give scores for each like policies or systems. So that could be one way to kind of observe the performance of the mayor. But I think the fundamental meaning of this type of digital mayor's office is it gives the mayor the self-censorship. So he knows all the citizens are watching what he is doing. So based on that fact, actually, because all the information is transparent, so kind of it motivated the mayor to work better and kind of improve his performances and so on. So yeah.
Kristi, do you want to talk about how some of these smart city policies have changed across different mayoral administrations, how different mayors have approached this?
Yes, and I love this question, especially in 2024, because I think what's really interesting about this story, or the story of Seoul as a smart city, or the development of Seoul as a smart city, is that the dedication to smart city policies has been constant. I mean, the mayors are very, those three mayors that we talk about, they're very different. They have very different priorities, but they've always kept this constant focus on a holistic smart city plan. So, I mean, starting with Lee Myung-bak, he was obviously the bulldozer. We were talking about that. He had this kind of view about Seoul, and the way that he worked, it was kind of go big or go home. You know, he did Cheonggyecheon, which is a huge project. He also decided he was going to restructure public transport for a city of 25 million people, which is also no easy feat. But when you think about the scope of those types of projects, when you're involved in any type of local politics, you think, well, that's huge. How did he get that through? How did he get that done? And he got it done really quickly. But he really had this very focused, big scope approach. And he's also kind of an old school politician, right? Old school conservative. Then you have Oh Se-hoon, who came on, and he's also conservative, but he's kind of the younger generation of the conservative. And he had more of this idea of a city on a hill. So he was really into beautification, user experience, what tourists see when they come to the city, the international reputation of the city. So he really focused on things like Dongdaemun Design Plaza and Han Renaissance program, because he wanted to make Seoul. He wanted to kind of build on that success that Lee Myung-bak had, and he kind of recognized that was a huge success, and he didn't want to undo that in any way. He wanted to augment it. And then you have Park Won-sun that came along, and he's very different. I mean, he definitely was not a conservative, definitely a liberal. He'd never held public office before, but had been dedicated more to nonprofit activities. And he he inherited this city that was kind of getting pretty famous, that was starting to work much better, a more developed city. And he thought, and so his thought was to bring in policies that focused on Korean values, kind of bringing that back to the equation. So he really recognized, and also transparency and making sure that everyone is benefiting from the growth. And so he kind of recognized this danger of growth, that growth isn't for growth's sake. Growth is really to live better and to have more of the life that you want, or to focus more on your values. So he was really focused on Korean values, but they never, and I think this is really relevant right now, is that they never tried to undo what the other did. They just kept going, and they kept building on it. And I think they, in building on what their predecessor had done, they kind of celebrated what their predecessor had done and augmented it. So I think that it's definitely a lesson that we can learn. Cities around the world can learn that, like undoing what your predecessor does doesn't make any sense. Kind of keeping that constant focus on smart city policy is really what gets things done, because 20 something years later, we're seeing the benefits of that. And we see that when we go to Seoul and we experience the great transport and the way such a mega city is functioning really quite well.
And you brought up Oh Se-hoon, the mayor, and one of the things he did is try to make Seoul a global design hub. So we think of the COEX and the Dongdaemun Design Plaza. Myeongdong has become a shopping center for around the world. So Sungjin, Dr. Park, could you please tell us about what this means for Seoul to be a global design hub?
Meaning that as the term itself, global design hub indicates, actually Mayor Oh Se-hoon has a very kind of strong will to make sure that the design industry, like Seoul, should be the hub of global design industry. So he kind of promoted, like after he became the mayor of Seoul for the first time, what he did was to appoint like a chief director of design Seoul, equivalent to a deputy mayor. So after that, actually, he promoted the concept of design in two different directions. One was like urban design or urban policy perspective. So he devised like a public design guideline that governs the shape and colors of utilities and city infrastructure like shelter and bench. And also, what he did was to in order to boost up the design industry based on Seoul, he actually, that's the reason why he built Dongdaemun Design Plaza. So even though the architecture itself is really beautiful, but actually they have been reading a lot of design relevant events taking place in Seoul. So coming back, actually, Mayor Oh Se-hoon, actually, he established not only Dongdaemun Design Plaza, he also established the Seoul Design Foundation. So, Seoul Design Foundation, actually, they have been promoting a lot of like a festival and global events. So, for example, Seoul Design Festival, every year, Seoul has been kind of holding Seoul Design Festival, and it's been 10 years. And they invite a lot of experts from like a global market. So that like a festival have become very important event. According to my understanding, it has become very important event that kind of boost up or gain attention from gain global attention to Seoul as the center of design industry.
Yeah, I'm sure anybody who looks at Seoul from abroad or is thinking about a trip to go there has seen this giant building, the Dongdaemun Design Plaza, designed by Zaha Hadid, and it's just become such an emblem of Seoul as a modern world city. Well, before I get to talking about the future and some of the things that are planned ahead for 2030 and otherwise, I want to talk about a more dour subject, but a way that smart city technologies can prevent these types of things in the future, which is the October 2022 Halloween crowd crush. This was the deadliest disaster in Korea since the Sewol in 2014. But something good has come out of it, where on the 1-year anniversary of the tragedy, the Seoul metropolitan government established an intelligent disaster prevention and safety system where they take pedestrian density data collected by security cameras, and they use this to prevent things like that from happening in the future. And I believe this is a great thing for the world. It can prevent this from happening anywhere else. So, Kristi, can you talk about what the Seoul government is doing with this?
Sure. I mean, I think you're right that this is a great development for the world, because this is definitely the most famous crowd crush we've seen. But this has also happened in Texas. It happened in Indonesia a few years ago as well. So this is kind of a modern problem that we have. And we really wanted to include this in the book because it was, this type of emergency response use of AI or use of data is something that Park Won-soon had foreseen. He talked about it. He said, it can be used for emergency response. And the tools were in place and the technology was kind of there. But this tragedy still happened. And so when we wanted to look at that and as a point of smart cities are always evolving and learning and improving and using the technology better, because sometimes it's not about having the technology, but it's the design of the technology or the design of the use of the technology. And that's really what we're seeing in this new legislation, which is really exciting. I mean, it can detect high levels of density in crowded spaces through AI, and yeah, I think it can be used not only in big events, but it can just be used in urban spaces to see what's healthy and what's not healthy, and it will give first responders really a better sense of how bad big problems are. It will be able to alert first responders before a human actually has to alert them. So, it's a great development, and it's a great way that we're seeing the city government of Seoul really being proactive and saying, there are things we can do. We can improve, even though we're good. And I think it's really commendable, actually, that they've reacted so quickly to honor these victims. I mean, because it was a tragedy, a huge tragedy for the world.
And something good has come out of it, which is that we now have more intelligent, safer cities. And I believe Seoul is a safer place to visit as a result. But you mentioned the elephant in the room, which is artificial intelligence. So do you want to talk about how AI is going to factor into smart city development in the future?
Yeah. To be honest, the term smart, it's already based on AI. I mean, first AI was really developed with the imitation game and the Turing machines in World War II. And so these smart technologies are really based on AI. I mean, they're sensors that then signal computers for automatic responses. It's using, GPS and digital technology for that. So it's really exciting how good AI is getting and how we're able to augment cities and make them more efficient through the use of AI. I mean, when I lived in Barcelona, we were always talking about the smart garbage bins, right? Which have two benefits, really. So basically they alert city officials or the city offices when they're full. So it saves on unnecessary trips to pick up the garbage, and it also keeps the city beautiful, which is actually a really important thing, because tourism, I mean, Barcelona, definitely tourism is very important, but I think tourism is important in most big cities. So so those types of efficiencies can cut down on costs. But where we also see AI being used is, for example, in transport, like I mentioned with the 2003 transport reform. Since there's such perfect data from the smart card or the T-Money app, they're really able to do so much with this data, and AI and they're able to advance AI so much that it really I mean, in Switzerland, for example, I work with the Swiss government, and I think Switzerland is very similar to Korea in that, punctuality of trains, punctuality of public transport, it's really very reliable. And that reliability comes from that AI. It comes from the data that is then fed into the machines that makes sure that things run on time. One of the things that we didn't talk about as much in our book is a very exciting transport application called demand response transport. So this is really kind of a mix between a taxi and a bus. It works really well in areas where maybe there's not where big public transport infrastructure investments don't make as much sense. It works very well for those that are mobility impaired, like the elderly. So basically what it is that people signal when they want to ride, and then the AI actually adjusts the route of the transport to include them. This is amazing. I mean, these are amazing uses of AI. And I think that, Korea is definitely at the forefront of this. They have one of the first DRT pilot programs, but there's so many ways in which AI is really augmenting the way that, or enhancing the way that city officials are able to organize and administer the city.
And it's important that Seoul is doing all of this as a democracy, the way that they're implementing AI to kind of monitor all of this data. But there are other places around the world that have used smart city technology to do things such as monitor social credit scores, and kind of painting a dark dystopian future of what if AI ran our cities. So Sungjin, can you talk about some of the drawbacks or the pushbacks against AI or smart city technology?
As many kind of other countries have faced, actually the sharing of data is a little bit kind of challenging in South Korea as well. So actually through the implementation of the government law, we have been, South Korea have been quite systematic system that can actually share data. What I mean by that, for instance, actually there was one project I actually participated, was actually the Korean government was kind of developing the similar type of system, like in China, like a social credit system. It was actually not for the general citizen, but for the non-payers. So if you don't pay taxes over 6 months, the government have the authority to access a credit score system and all kinds of data, like how much you pay for your utilities and when you buy the houses. So, but the difference between China and South Korea, I guess, is all the things taking place in South Korea is under the law. And so to somehow South Korea has made good progress in sharing the data, at least within public agencies. But still the problem that Korea government has is the sharing between the private sector data and the public sector data. So many people know that when we combine the data from the private sector, like credit card and many others, and the public sector data, then it could have a huge implication how to improve urban policies or like welfare services. But it actually is not possible under the condition of the current law. So that kind of to somehow like progress on the better data driven, becoming the better data driven cities, I think.
Maybe I want to add something to that, just because you mentioned democracies and it's an election year, right? It's a big election year around the world. I think people, they talk about AI. There's a lot of fear mongering around AI, but AI is a tool at the end of the day, and a tool that we'd be silly not to use because it can improve our lives. So I think what people need to think about is not about the tool itself, but the people who administer that tool, which is the government. And so, especially in democracies, I think we want to think about, do we trust this person to administer these tools? Do we trust it? And I think that that's another big kind of story that we're trying to tell, is that all of these three leaders, they were very trustworthy in the way that they administered or created citizen-centered interventions, urban interventions. And I think that, especially when talking about AI, we have to consider that trust issue. Do we trust these candidates? Do we trust the government? And we should, because then our lives would improve a lot, right? Because we'd be able to use a lot more AI. We'd be able to trust that it's being used in a responsible way and not to take advantage of it.
And apart from AI, there are some exciting things to expect into the future in the way that this can handle many parts of city management. But there are two other things that we're looking at for Seoul heading into the future. So the first is this KCity Network. Recently, Korea added New Jersey, the state of New Jersey, to its list of its KCity networks. So Kristi, can you talk about what this KCity Network is and what Korea is kind of doing with this?
Okay. Well, the KCity Network, it's really a program that the Korean government has put together to kind of give back. It's all part of this, what do they call it, the Hongik philosophy of kind of making the world better and working to make the world better. And I think that there's definitely a sense, especially, that's definitely a feeling that I get when I go to South Korea and I speak with Koreans, that there's a sense of kind of giving back what they've received in the past. And so the KCity program is just that. It's a program that provides funding from the Korean government to work on projects abroad and to bring kind of that know-how that they've built up over the last 20, 30 years in Korea to other parts of the world that need help. I think there was also a program in Baltimore related to like a water program, either last year or the year before. Most of the programs most of the projects are in Asia, but there've been a couple in Latin America as well, I think. And it's really about a collaboration between a U.S. or a foreign-based entity and a Korean company. So, it's a great story, I think. Also, when you look at this New Jersey project or a Baltimore project, because so much of modern Korea was built in conjunction with U.S. government officials, kind of on a U.S. model, and a model that maybe doesn't make that much sense for such a small, dense country, because obviously the U.S. is a huge country. So part of Korea's know-how comes from shifting from that U.S.-based model to their own model, and something more modern that uses a lot of this technology, right? And I think the New Jersey one is related to road surface icing. That's right. Accidents by sound, which sounds very technical. It sounds very smart, but it kind of makes sense that this is something that maybe they've developed as they've been shifting away from American model to their own model and finding better solutions. And then they're able to bring this back to the US. So yeah, it's a really exciting program.
Yeah, there's definitely a midpoint between the old grid system and then maybe the modern American spread out road sprawl. Maybe Seoul and what they're doing with this is the perfect median of the two. Mm-hmm. So Dr. Park, is kind of a final question here. What can we expect in the future? So there's Seoul Vision 2030. Can you talk about what they're doing with that?
Yeah, actually, for me, it takes quite few time to understand the true meaning of this Seoul Vision 2030. If you kind of Google it, actually it comprises of like four strategies and 17 goals and like 78 policies. So, but like look back and I kind of see now I understand that that's like Oseon's ambition to actually upgrade Seoul into the next like better city. So kind of the intention of that Seoul Vision 23 is the whole renewal of Seoul, like not only the physical space, but also like a social or economic and environmental perspective. So, and one of the key kind of initiative he kind of strongly interested and pursue is to become make Seoul to become the top five like a global tourist destination city. So now actually I can actually see Seoul is changing to become the place more uh, like a friendly to the like a global tourist, especially now actually spring season South Korea has a really good weather and many like spaces in Seoul they have been offering like a small and big kind of pop-up events everywhere now. So so I can actually literally see a lot of people coming to Seoul, like a global tourist coming to Seoul and kind of enjoy those kind of events and activities.
There's a lot to expect in the future. Well, for anybody who's traveling to Korea, I highly recommend Seoul, Tale of a Smart City. It's available on Amazon.
Yes, available on Amazon and Barnes & Noble. I think Aladdin in Korea, right?
Yeah, Aladdin in South Korea.
That's great. So, Dr. Park, Ms. Shalla, thank you very much for coming in, and thanks to our audience for watching.
Thank you for having us. I really enjoyed it.